Boy, it's a really long term for a very simple idea, which is just building on community strengths. That for too long we've just focused on what's missing in communities. We often do needs assessments of communities to figure out what are all their problems and how can local government and other agencies be most helpful. And over time, communities have started to internalize that map of themselves, and they're just focusing on what they're missing, and they're always looking outside their community for the answers. They're always looking to government for all the answers, or we can't do a thing till we get a grant, and people have forgotten about their own capacity. And so it's about reminding communities and agencies about the incredible underutilized strengths of community. One of those key strengths is recognizing every individual in our community, everybody, without exception, has gifts to give to our community. Their unique knowledge, their skills, their passions, but then increasingly we're putting labels on huge sections of our community that label them not by their gifts, but by what they're missing. So we instead of identifying people by their gifts, we use labels like at-risk youth, old people, disabled, non-English speaking, single parent, unemployed, homeless, etc., etc., etc. So that we've labeled most people in our society not by what their gifts, but by what they're missing. And we just focus on what people are missing, they become clients in a service system. And we focus on people's gifts, they become citizens in our community. So it's the basis for reconnecting people in communities, for rebuilding that social capital that we've lost over time. And it's also about recognizing that communities, for this approach to work right, communities need to be driving the change. It's not just about utilizing people's gifts to do business as usual, to volunteer on the projects and services of agencies, but to really support community-initiated efforts, that there's some things communities do best. That there's a role for government and other nonprofits, but there's absolutely no substitute for community when it comes to the things we care most deeply about. And that there are all kinds of underutilized resources in our communities that could be used to address the very real needs that we have in our community. But if we just focus on the needs, we're missing out on incredible strengths. I think the key for building healthy, inclusive, connected communities is it requires a change in the part of both communities and agencies. In some ways, the agencies that are trying to help our communities have contributed to the breakdown of our communities, because our agencies are organized into silos according to their function. So there's one silo for the seniors, and there's one for the youth, and there's one for people with disabilities, and you can't build community in silos. So it's about how do we get agencies to start focusing on whole places again rather than on separate functions. Another problem we have with agencies is we have more and more professionals doing for communities what they used to do for themselves, and what sometimes communities can do better for themselves. So it's about how do we get agencies to step back, lead by stepping back, and make room for communities to share their gifts and to be supportive of one another. Again, recognizing there's some things communities do best. On the community side, it's about how do they change the work they do, so that instead of always looking outside the communities for the answers, they start to focus on the resources within their communities, because that's the basis for getting a lot more people engaged. If we can take those labels off and focus on everybody's gifts, then they become part of the community. They aren't clients, they're citizens. So that's the way to get a lot of the people involved who currently aren't part of our community work. It's also about finding ways other than meetings to bring people together. That too oftentimes the automatic response is we need to build community, we need to get our community engaged, so let's have a meeting. What a stupid idea. It's like the worst way to get people involved in community. How many people do you know who love to come out to meetings, right? You know, you sign up for that first meeting and you get your name in the sign-in sheet and you're going to be sentenced to meetings for the rest of your life, right? And a lot of people don't see results from meetings. One meeting just leads to another meeting, nothing ever happens. And a lot of people are shy and they're told, look, if you really care about your community, you're going to come to our meeting, but they just sit there. They don't feel like they're contributing anything. That's how much they care, they actually show up. So if we really want to get people engaged, we need to use other ways to get people involved in community. I got a friend who says, why have a meeting when you can have a party? Think about it. The purpose isn't who can endure the most suffering. The purpose is to build relationships, and you can do that a lot more through fun than you can through meetings. So having more social events, more block parties, more street parties, great way to build community. Projects, I love projects, because with projects, unlike with meetings, there's always a result. Short-term commitment, there's a role for everybody, for young people, elders, people with disabilities, construction workers, architects, people who would never come to the meetings. And once people build relationships, then they're more likely to come to some meetings. But we always lead with the meetings and wonder why the same people keep showing up. It's also recognizing all the ways people are organized in our communities. Oftentimes we're trying to get everybody to join our group, and we forget that most people are already organized. They just don't belong to our group. So finding the other ways people are organized in our communities. They may be in faith-based groups, or in school-based groups, or sporting groups, or hobby groups. There are all kinds of ways people are organized in communities. And people only have so much time in their lives, and they got the relationships within their existing groups. So reaching out to those other organizations in our community and figuring out, finding common interests and how we can work together across those different communities. And I think a third one is just finding out what people care most deeply about. That oftentimes we're just out there pushing our agenda, what we care about, what we're passionate about, or what we get paid to be passionate about, or what we've got a grant to be passionate about. And then when nobody joins us, we say, God, people are apathetic, right? Nobody's apathetic. Everybody cares deeply about something. So rather than start with an answer, rather than just try to start with a program, you start with a question. What keeps you awake at night? Or what are your dreams for your family, for your community? Because if you can tap into what people care most deeply about, give them a sense they can do something about it, they're much more likely to get involved than if you spend a lot of time trying to convince them to care about what you care about, right? And then it's about starting small so people can actually see results from their participation. That people are feeling so powerless these days. It's like you can't fight City Hall, you know? Or, you know, I knock on the door, said, you know, there are problems in your neighborhood, and say, why, are you a lawyer? And the implication was that only lawyers and politicians have any power in our society, which is a pretty sad indictment of a democracy, right? So it's about giving people the sense that by banding together through collective action, they can make change. So you don't start with world peace, you don't start with climate change, because people are never going to start in that big stuff, because it's hard to see change. They're never going to work on the big stuff if they don't think they even have power to make change on their own street. So the first step is to involve people in small issues, in small projects, and show them how they can make change through collective action. And once they get a sense of the power of people coming together, then they're more likely to work on the bigger issues, but they aren't going to start there. Wow, the community is the force of change. If you think about it, everything we care most deeply about is best done by community. Whether it's raising our kids, that can't be done by agencies as well as it can be done by parents and community members. Taking care of our elders. So care for one another is one of the unique roles of community. Another unique role of community, I think, is the power to care for the earth. That it can't just be something where you're creating more and more green technology. People actually have to adopt it. And people will only adopt it if they feel some sense of connection with one another in the place they share, and some sense that collectively our actions are going to make a difference. Just think of yourself as one person on this huge planet. What difference does it make if I don't act responsibly? I'm one person. But it's in community. We feel some sense of accountability, some sense that we can make a difference. When it comes to crime, police officers can enforce laws, but only communities can prevent crime. We're spending way too many resources lining up the ambulances at the bottom of the cliff when we should be busy building fences at the top, and that's the role for community. See, over and over again with disasters, you've had so many of them here, with the bushfires, with the flooding. People are totally dependent on their neighbors in times of disaster, immediately afterwards. But they often realize it when it's too late. Right? Seeing social justice, no major social change has ever come top down. It all comes bottom up. My country, the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement, the disability rights movement, the gay lesbian rights movement, the anti-war movement, the environmental movement, every major social change has come bottom up. So without strong communities, we can't make change. So if you think in health, studies show about 15% of health outcomes can actually be attributed to healthcare professionals. In many ways, our communities can have a much bigger impact on our health, on our behaviors that affect our health, on our mental health, on the social and environmental and physical and social conditions that impact our health, economic conditions. So if you think about it, there's no substitute for community when it comes to the things we care most deeply about. just do it. Just do it. Don't wait for permission. You know, don't wait for somebody to ask you. Just roll up your sleeves and have conversations with other people. Find out what they care about. Identify key networks in your community and sit down with the formal and informal leaders. Find out what they care about. Find common interests, shared interests. Identify everybody's gifts, and particularly people who've been labeled by what they don't have, because that's the basis. You get there's so many people just waiting to be asked, waiting to contribute their gifts. I guess those would be the keys, you know, building the relationships, finding out what people care about, and identifying their gifts, and then bringing people together around sort of a shared vision, and it'll take off, right? And not waiting for permission, just realizing there's a lot you can do as a community. Don't wait for the grant. Don't wait for somebody in elected office to give their blessing. Just do it. Because if you can identify what you've got in your community, you don't have to wait for outside support. You can just do it, because you've got incredible untapped resources, just incredible resources. And the kind of creativity that comes from community, it's just amazing. People are so used to just reading the papers about the bad stuff, and they start thinking that is the norm. And they forget about the incredible capacity of community and the incredible things people are doing right here, whether it's in the men's sheds, or whether it's in Dookie with the wonderful trail they built, or whether it's, you know, with the wonderful new playground that's been built, or there are all kinds of things, wonderful things happening in this community, and that's really what makes Shepparton such a special place. So we need to get more of that, and get those stories out and spread it, inspire more people about what's possible when people discover the strengths of their community.